Finally, I can speak. Those were Cher's exact words, after 50 years of silence about Elvis Presley. What she finally admitted about the one night he called, the night he waited for her answer, the night she said no, has left fans stunned. It wasn't just a missed date. It was a moment that haunted her for decades. And now, for the first time, Cher is ready to tell the truth about Elvis. Why she turned him down, what he said to her, and what she still carries with her all these years later. Because this isn't just about two music icons. It's about timing, fear, regret, and the kind of love story that never even had the chance to begin. It happened in the early 1970s, but the memory has never left her. At the time, Elvis Presley was riding a second wave of fame. His Las Vegas residency was electric. His shows sold out for months in advance, and even though the years had taken a toll on him, he was still larger than life. Women fainted in the aisles. Fans traveled across the country just for a glimpse of the man who changed music forever. And yet, behind all that, he was lonely. Cher, meanwhile, had just ended one of the most complicated and public relationships of her life. Her marriage to Sonny Bono, equal parts partnership in prison, had left her raw. She was in her 20s, reinventing herself, stepping out of Sonny's shadow and into her own light. She was bold, yes, fierce, daring, but emotionally, she was fragile. That's when the call came. No assistant, no PR rep, just Elvis. She later described the moment with disbelief, like it was something out of a movie. He didn't flirt. He didn't pressure. He just asked, would she come to Vegas? Would she spend the weekend with him? It wasn't a casual invitation, not from someone like him. And for a moment, Cher froze. She had admired him since she was a teenager. She once said that when Elvis first came onto the scene, the world shifted. And now here he was on the phone, asking her to spend time with him. She felt honored, flattered, terrified, because this wasn't just a date. This was Elvis Presley. To say yes to him wasn't like saying yes to a normal man. It was saying yes to a world she didn't fully understand and wasn't sure she belonged in. I didn't feel ready, she admitted years later. He was too much for me at the time. I was still figuring myself out. She was healing from the Sonny years, still unsure of who she was without him. Going to Vegas meant opening a door she didn't know how to walk through. And so, she said no, just like that, quietly, respectfully. I told him I was sorry, Cher recalled, but I just couldn't. What's remarkable is how human the moment was. No drama, no grand declarations. Just two people, two legends in the making, at a crossroads neither could fully see. Elvis didn't argue. He didn't call again. The line went silent, and the moment passed. For the world, it was nothing. A phone call that never made headlines. But for Cher, it became a moment she would revisit again and again. Because saying no to Elvis Presley wasn't just turning down a date. It was walking away from a story that might have changed her life. And she's never pretended otherwise. In interview after interview, when the subject of Elvis comes up, there's a pause, a softness, a small, almost imperceptible ache in her voice. It wasn't about romance. It was about what could have been. It was about standing on the edge of something unknown and stepping back. At the time, Cher was being pulled in every direction. TV shows, solo albums, public scrutiny, paparazzi. She was still finding her footing in a world that often tried to shape her into someone she wasn't. She didn't have the energy or the courage to let someone like Elvis in. Not when she was still building herself. So she made the safest choice. She stayed home. And in doing so, she walked away from one of the greatest icons of the 20th century, not as a fan, but as a woman. And she's lived with that decision ever since. After she turned him down, Cher never heard from Elvis again. Not a second call, not a handwritten note, not even a passing message through mutual friends. And in the beginning, she didn't expect one. She told herself it was just a missed connection, a brief flirtation, a blip in a life filled with dramatic highs and lows. There was no reason to dwell on it, but she did. Not every day, not constantly, but late at night, when the shows were over, the lights were down, and the makeup came off, she'd think about it. That moment, That call. That pause before she said no. And she'd wonder. She was a woman of action, not regret. But that call stayed with her, not like a burden, but like a question that had never been answered. What would have happened if she had said yes? Would Elvis have shown her a different side of himself? Would she have seen the man behind the rhinestones and the reputation? Because the truth is, she suspected that underneath the flash and the fame, Elvis was deeply, achingly human. And years later, as more stories came out about his struggles with fame, his reliance on medication, the pressure of his image, Cher began to see what she had only sensed before, that Elvis had been isolated, controlled, and possibly deeply unhappy. "I think he was looking for something real," she once said, "and I wasn't ready to be that for anyone." By the mid-1970s, both of them had evolved. Cher was stepping into her prime, reclaiming her career, embracing her individuality. She had gone from being Sonny's sidekick to a household name on her own. She was fierce, empowered, but also more emotionally grounded. And it was around then, just as she was finding her footing, that she realized what she'd lost. Not a relationship exactly, but the possibility of one. A connection that may have changed both their lives. "I don't dwell on it," she said, "but it's one of those things that lives quietly inside you." She didn't talk about it much. Elvis was a cultural monument. People didn't want to hear about what might have happened. They wanted stories about what did. And Cher? She wasn't interested in cheapening the memory. She didn't want to use his name for attention. That was never her style, so she kept it to herself. For years, she watched Elvis from afar. She saw the tabloids, the stories about his health, his entourage, the women who came and went. She never reached out, never called. Maybe she thought he wouldn't remember, or maybe she was afraid he would. And then, in 1977, the unthinkable happened. Elvis died, alone in Graceland, at just 42 years old. When the news broke, Cher was silent. No press statements, no tribute concerts, no televised interviews, just silence. But behind closed doors, she wept. "I didn't feel entitled to mourn him," she once admitted. "We didn't have a history. We didn't have stories to tell. But I cried anyway. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about legacy. It was personal. Because when Elvis died, so did the one version of a story Cher had never allowed herself to live. And that grief, the private, unspoken kind, is the hardest kind to carry. She never went public with any statement. No tributes. No interviews. Just silence. Because for Cher, grief didn't need a spotlight. It needed space. She didn't feel like she had earned the right to mourn. After all, what could she possibly say that hadn't already been said? She wasn't Priscilla. She wasn't one of the Memphis inner circle. She wasn't a former lover with a string of memories. But she was a woman who had been offered a glimpse, just a glimpse into Elvis's world. And she had turned it away. That grief didn't come from loss. It came from possibility. And that's what made it harder to shake. Years went by, and the world continued to celebrate Elvis in grand, public ways. Anniversaries, documentaries, tribute concerts, biopics. But Cher never joined in. She never inserted herself into the story. She never mentioned that once, long ago, Elvis Presley had personally picked up the phone and invited her into his world. "It felt too sacred," she quietly told a friend. "It wasn't for the cameras." But time, as it often does, softened the sharp edges of that memory. And what once felt like a wound began to feel like something else. Something quieter, more forgiving. Still, she didn't speak about it. Not publicly, not in memoirs, not on talk shows, until one day, not so long ago, she finally let the words out. And they came gently, almost as a whisper. "Finally, I can speak." Why now? Because she's lived long enough to know that some truths need time. That some stories don't ripen until decades later. After the noise has faded. After the spotlight moves on. And all that remains is the echo of a moment that could have meant everything. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She wasn't chasing nostalgia. She was simply ready. Ready to forgive her younger self. ready to share the part of Elvis no one ever saw, ready to stop pretending that it didn't matter when it did. In an era of constant oversharing and rehashed drama, Cher's silence had been a rare kind of grace. But her voice, when it finally returned, carried the weight of 50 years. And that's what made it powerful. Because when she spoke, she didn't offer a scandal. She didn't tease some secret romance or scandalous confession. She simply told the truth, that she was young, that she was afraid, that she didn't know how to say yes to someone like Elvis. And she's lived with that choice ever since. "I said no," she admitted, "and I never stopped thinking about it." In those quiet, reflective words, you could hear so much more than regret. You could hear reverence. You could hear love, not romantic love, but human love. The kind that reaches across time and space and says, "I saw you. I knew you mattered, even if just for a moment." And what makes this story so deeply resonant is that it's not just hers. It's universal, because we've all said no to something we weren't ready for. We've all walked away from people we couldn't hold on to. We've all wondered how different things might have been, if we had been just a little braver, a little older, a little less scared. Cher's story with Elvis isn't a tabloid headline. It's a love letter to every almost that shaped who we are. And in the end, maybe that's what stays with us the longest. Not the things we had, but the things we let go of too soon. Cher has always been bold, loud, unapologetically herself. But in this story, she's quiet. She's reflective. She's vulnerable. And that's why people are listening. Because when she says, "Finally, I can speak," it's not just about Elvis. It's about every missed chance, every unanswered question, every long pause in the middle of a life lived at full volume. It's about finally giving voice to the silence that's lingered for half a century. There was no great romance, no dramatic twist, just two people, two icons, standing at the edge of something that never began. And one of them said no, and never forgot it. For more of the latest news, check out this video.